Chris, again, thank you for taking some time out of your day to speak with us about question 5 on the November ballot in Massachusetts. Just as a reminder for people watching, question 5 would be raising the minimum wage for tipped workers from its current mark of $6.75 an hour. It would raise that mark over to the $15 per hour minimum wage, general minimum wage mark over the next 5 years. And then from there, tips could also be pooled together and distributed to other workers at restaurants, the tip money from waiters and whatnot. And again, you are advocating for no on question 5. Just in general, could you give us the basis of the platform? Why are you and your team advocating for no?
Sure. Well, one of the main things here is it's a common misconception. Uh, every server and bartender, everyone that is a tipped employee here in Massachusetts is guaranteed $15 an hour, regardless of what the other side is saying. Yes, it starts at $6.75, but as long as tips add up to $15 or more, that's what's called the tip. It doesn't add up to $15 on the employer legally. By that, make sure that you're guaranteed $15. We're opposed for one big reason. Servers and bartenders don't want this. When we first got hired, we talked to servers and bartenders. We did a poll of servers and bartenders, other tipped employees. And it came back that 91% wanted to keep things the way it is. They like being able to work for their tips. They like the opportunity to be able to earn far more than the minimum wage, and they don't want to be considered minimum wage workers. The other piece of this is the tip pooling part. Right now in Massachusetts, tipped employees can take part in an optional pool. If this were to pass, it would take the tips directly out of the hands of servers, bartenders, and other tipped employees, and put it in the hands of management, who can decide where those tips go. Front of the house, it can be back of the house, it could be cleaners and bookkeepers, and right now that's illegal here in Massachusetts. And servers and bartenders don't want to see their money taken away.
Now, you mentioned the poll that was taken, 91% of workers saying no to this. How big was the pool there? Who was polled for that?
It was approximately 400 respondents of servers and bartenders across the state. It met all the demographic lines that we'd like to keep for a scientifically valid poll. And it's playing out as we've come across people across the state. I've personally gone to 40 or 50 restaurant pre-meals and presented. We've had over 1,000 servers sign up on our website as either volunteers or signed a petition saying, I don't want this. And frankly, we've had members of the media that are trying to do yes and no arguments tell us they're having a hard time finding people that aren't paid directly by the Yes campaign to come on and say that they're opposed. It's just not there. And the reason it's not there is because the group that's leading this is an out-of-state activist group from California. Doing this nationally, they've tried to file this legislation 5 sessions in a row at the State House, and they failed each time because it's a bad idea. And over the course of 10 years, they haven't been able to put together a coalition. There are no unions that have endorsed this group. They have 0 bartenders and servers that have donated to their campaign. And right now, the only real donors that they have are coming directly from the group that's pushing this. Frankly, they're answering a question that nobody here was asking.
Have any unions endorsed no on the flip side of that?
So every union has stayed neutral. One union has come out publicly, and although they haven't endorsed, they have said explicitly that they are opposed to the polling piece of this ballot question, and that's why they couldn't endorse and are urging a no vote. And that's the Hospitality Workers Union, Local 26.
Gotcha. Now, of course, there's another aspect to this outside of the workers who would be getting the bump up in that minimum wage rather up to $15. Of course, business owners and consumers are playing a part of this as well. How do you think that this would impact if it is a yes vote to business owners and customers at these establishments?
Oh, absolutely. And this isn't just my opinion. This is the Yes side is actively talking about this when they present as well. They acknowledge that prices are going to go up. They acknowledge that automation and layoffs are likely to happen. They acknowledge that restaurants are likely to close. They just don't care. The way we've seen it, owners are opposed to this. Servers and bartenders are opposed to this. And the general public, as they learn more, are increasingly opposed to this because they know that the prices are going to go through the roof in restaurants, as well as just the closures alone. Washington, D.C. is a perfect example of this. Got implemented at the Washington, D.C. Level. And in year one, 4,000 jobs have been lost out of the 30,000 that are in the tip. Restaurants are closing. People are moving away from the businesses that are forcing this on them, and they're actually you're seeing servers and bartenders flood into Northern Virginia and Southern Maryland. They don't want it. A few years ago, I believe it was 6. This passed up in Portland, Maine. Servers and bartenders were so opposed once it passed that they marched to City Hall and demanded it be repealed, and it was repealed. You know, the yes side likes to talk about California. California, according to Toast, which is kind of the back-end system where everyone rings in their orders at restaurants, they have a huge amount of the market share. They say that California consistently ranks at the bottom of the entire country. Percentage that the average person tips in California is lower than anywhere else. So if people can't afford to go out, if layoffs are happening and tips are going down, how is this possibly a good idea for the industry as a whole?
Now, one of the major points that the yes on 5 side contends is that relying on tips, even with the guarantee that you had mentioned up to 15, is still a risky endeavor based on a wide range of variables in these service industries, in these service establishments. And that question 5 would provide for that livable, comfortable net of a wage. How would you respond to that point?
I haven't seen a single valid data point that proves their points. You know, if they want to talk about sexual harassment in the workplace, it's intolerable, and we absolutely don't condone any of that. You know, if wage theft is happening, if sexual harassment is happening, that's not only is that in every industry, it's unacceptable in every industry. And if they go to their managers, if they go to the owners, those are the types of things that immediately get squashed. You know, people that are in the industry that are living it day to day here in Massachusetts are overwhelmingly saying, I make significantly more than minimum wage. You know, what will happen when someone understands, all right, well, you're already making $15. I don't have to tip you any. That's happening in Washington, D.C. right now, where if you walk into a restaurant, instead of seeing the 18, 20, 22% suggested tips on your bill, I was there 2 weeks ago. I saw 8, 10, and 12. I talked to servers there, and they said they've never earned less than in the last year. We have to understand where this group is from. Radical group from California that has been under investigation by multiple states, under investigation by the United States Congress for their misappropriation of 501c3 funds with nonprofit funds. And they're under investigation here in Massachusetts because they announced that they had a $2 million anonymous donor, which is illegal. You can't do that. So this is a group that consistently lies on a regular basis and can't be trusted. I mean, frankly, they tried to get on the ballot in Ohio, and it was such a fiasco in Ohio that the Secretary of State there described them as a deceitful, duplicitous goat rodeo of a campaign.
Now, Chris, if people are getting ready, as we're a couple weeks away from the general election, as people are getting ready to submit their ballots, whether it's by mail, early, or on election day, what's one thing you would want them to remember as they look at question 5 on the Massachusetts ballot?
Want them to remember that owners are opposed to this, restaurants are opposed to this, servers are opposed to this, and the people that will have to pay the difference is the general public. This is a nonpartisan issue. People that are a bipartisan campaign, people that do not typically agree. I think you can agree that managers and staff don't typically agree, but look at the mayors that have come out and endorsed no. Mayor Sisitsky in Framingham came out as a no. But if you look at the ultra right and the ultra left, we have one of the most conservative mayors in Massachusetts in Bob Hedlund from Plymouth, and one of the most progressive mayors in Massachusetts in Nicole LaChapelle over in East Hampton, all saying vote no. These people don't agree on anything. They agree voting no on question 5. People need to learn more. I suggest they go to protecttips.org because that's our website. It has all our commercials. Fact versus fiction page on there to prove out all the lies that the other side is saying. And I think the more people get educated, the quicker they become a no vote. You can tell by the polling that came out today.
Chris, I appreciate your time speaking about this. Thank you very much for coming on to the Zoom and talking with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Well, Grace, thank you very much for coming on to speak with us today in regards to question 5. Just a reminder for people watching this, question 5 asks voters if they would prefer to raise the minimum wage for tipped workers in Massachusetts from the current mark of $6.75 an hour over the course of 5 years. That mark would be raised to the state's general minimum wage, which is at $15 an hour now. And then from there, tips could all be pulled together and distributed. And of course, you and your team are advocating for a yes vote on question 5 on the 2024 ballot in the Bay State. Tell us about the platform. Why should voters vote yes on question 5?
Correct. Yeah, I think people should vote yes on 5 because it's honestly the fair thing to do for a lot of groups of people. It's fair for the workers who are currently being paid a sub-minimum wage and have to, you know, in order to make sure that they're getting paid enough, have to keep up with the different laws and make sure they're checking their tip percentages each hour. Um, it's fair to consumers who right now are being used as a subsidy for labor costs. Tips right now are not actually being used as tips. They are going uh, towards the tip credit so that labor or that employers don't have to pay the full minimum wage. And lastly, it's fair to employers that already pay a full minimum wage to their workers. It'll even the playing field for a lot of small businesses that are already doing the right thing.
Now, one fair wage. Have you and your team spoken with workers within the industry to get a gauge of how they feel about this ballot question?
Yeah, absolutely. That is most of what my day-to-day work is outreach with tipped workers and talking to them about the ballot question, how they feel, and just people's personal experience in the state as workers. And from everyone I've talked to, people seem overwhelmingly supportive of this. The only people who are apprehensive are those who have bosses that are on the no on 5 side. So bosses who are saying no on 5, who are promoting the lies that people are going to lose their jobs, that all the restaurants are going to close down. I don't want to say that there's no risk and no reason for anyone to be concerned at all that nothing is going to change. But we've seen this work in 7 other states. And also, the restaurant industry is very tumultuous. I mean, turnover is crazy in the restaurant industry for employees. And also, I see restaurants just around me close and open all the time. So that's going to continue to happen whether or not this bill passes.
Right. And that's actually a perfect transition because I did want to ask about some of the lessons learned in regards to those 7 states that have already implemented this in their neck of the woods. What are some of the takeaways that you and your team have had from that and things that might be instituted within Massachusetts, some of the effects of this potentially passing? What could we see here locally based off of what we've already learned?
Yeah, so what we've seen is that there's lower rates of turnover in restaurants. You have employees who feel more supported, who have a more stable, consistent paycheck. So they're more willing to show up and stay, and they feel better about staying longer at a place that values them. We've seen tipped workers in states with one fair wage have about half the rate of poverty of than tipped workers who are in states with sub-minimum wages. And we've also seen harassment for tipped workers go down because people are no longer, like I mentioned, looking to the customer as their boss or as this person who is subsidizing the cost of their labor. Now a tip is actually going to be just a tip, and you no longer have to do weird tricks and dance around just to make it to a full $15 an hour.
And how about the aspect of pooling tip money together from there? Do you have any thoughts in regards to that aspect of the potential legislation?
Yeah, so I think anyone who works in a restaurant hopefully realizes that it's a team effort. I mean, personally, as a tipped worker, I know that half the time I receive tips because um, someone enjoyed our conversation or thought I was funny or is in a good mood, um, or liked the atmosphere, or literally just had a good time. And half or more of the time it's because they loved the food, they loved the beer, they loved that the product, and it had nothing to do with me because I didn't make it. So it's really entirely a team effort. And right now we have a tiered system so that front of house workers are making sub minimum wage and back of house workers are making at least minimum wage, hopefully more. But it evens the playing field so that everyone has a consistent wage to rely on. And something I'd like to mention about the tip pooling as well is that this creates an option for restaurants to tip pool, so it doesn't mandate it. It does not require the restaurants to pool, and no management, no salaried staff are going to be getting your tips. That's still illegal. Um, Tip sharing is something that happens in a lot of other states, and it increases camaraderie among staff. It also will help the back of house workers make a little extra money, because usually kitchens are lower paid staff than the front of house workers at the end of the day. And they still do a lot of the important work that gets you that tip.
Right, right. And you mentioned it towards the start of our conversation, but I wanted to get into some of more of the specifics here from you in regards to the other aspects of this, which are the business owners and the customers. The effect of this, if question 5 is to pass, what that means for people who are running these businesses, as well as the customers who are going to frequent them.
Yeah. So first for business owners, there's already 250 restaurants at least in the state of Massachusetts that pays one fair wage or above. Um, and they've made it work. We have lots of restaurant owners on our side who talk about how it's more profitable. It's better for keeping reliable employees, and creating a consistent environment and just a happy workplace. Um, and also keeping people around is better for business. Having the regulars know that they're going to see the server that they want to see rather than some new college kid every 3 weeks, is a determining factor on whether or not you're going to eat there. So I think it's there's not a one size fits all because obviously restaurants are completely different, in shape and size and menu and staff size and every which way. Um, but there are restaurants in Massachusetts. There are hundreds of restaurants in Massachusetts who have made this work. There are hundreds of thousands of restaurants across the country that have made this work. It is possible, and you don't even necessarily have to increase your menu prices. I mean, restaurants have been facing increased food costs for um, forever. So I think, to the point that this will increase costs are going to increase whether or not this happens. And they don't have to increase directly as a result of this. But restaurant workers have seen costs rise time and time again, and we're still given the same buying power, and given the same cost for our labor, which is unfair. Um, and yeah, I would say the biggest thing for restaurant owners is that a reliable employee, and especially front of house staff, is going to be worth a little extra money in the next year. Um, it's going to be worth keeping them around and making them happy and making them feel supported. And then I also think for consumers, there's such a huge problem of tip fatigue recently. I think, feeling like you have to tip 20 or even more percent, especially in states that don't pay a full minimum wage to bartenders and servers, even if they're just giving you one beer or, a black coffee and some French fries. is crazy. The average person should be able to go out and eat a meal and not worry about whether or not their server is going to take home a full wage at the end of the night, and whether or not they're personally responsible for whether or not that server takes home 15 versus $18 an hour tonight. I think it'll make people feel better, just about going out to eat, and it opens up tipped services to people who may not have felt they were financially in a place to go out and tip their waiters, like I said, over 20%.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up the point in regards to prices going up potentially for businesses and consumers, because that is one of the contentions of proponents of a no vote would bring up, and I did want to give you a chance to respond to that. Additionally, people who are advocating for no on 5 contend that this could actually hurt the earning power of restaurant workers who are currently now faced with the $75 an hour minimum wage mark. How would you respond to that point?
Yeah, so to that point, I would say that studies have been done on increasing the subminimum wage, and namely the UMass professor Jeanette Wixlin, who testified in favor of this, has done studies on labor and specifically on the increase of subminimum wages. And increasing the subminimum wage does not affect employment in a significant way. So, jobs aren't lost, or if they're lost, around the same amount of jobs are made with new restaurants. But what increases throughout increasing the subminimum wage is the earnings of tipped workers. I mean, if you look at the change that we're proposing, it's pretty ridiculous to say that you're not going to make more money. I mean, there may be a few career bartenders who this system really, really works for, but ultimately this ballot question is not about them. I mean, people who are working in high foot traffic or high dollar value restaurants or bars and are consistently getting the good shifts and are consistently making, anywhere from $500 to thousands of dollars in tips a night, they're still going to make good money. These people are going to be okay. These people who the system is already working for are going to continue being okay. Who this ballot question is really about is for the people that the system is not working for the people who are having inconsistent shifts, who have kids or have classes or have no transportation options to get to a bar shift in the middle of the night in the busy city, people who can't afford to live in Boston and live out in the suburbs of Massachusetts, and still have to pay for their bills with restaurant work. Those are the people we're advocating for. And overall, as an average, tipped workers do make more when you increase their wages. It's pretty simple math.
As we are a couple of weeks away from the general election and the start of early voting, mail-in voting, things like that across Massachusetts, what's one thing you would want people to remember when they look at question 5 on their ballot?
Yeah, I want people to remember that the subminimum wage for workers is creating a tiered system that dehumanizes a workforce that makes up 10% of the American population. Like 1 in 2 Americans at some point in their life work in a restaurant job. We call it, or the National Restaurant Association calls it, America's first job. So this is a huge group of people we're talking about. And it's not only fair to them, but it's fair to you if you go out and eat at restaurants. I imagine that the average consumer does not want to be thought of as the boss and does not want to be made to be in charge of this extra labor cost and whether or not this employee is going to make a full minimum wage in the day or make over that. I would also say that this is very clearly working in the entire rest of the world. A sub-minimum wage is a uniquely American problem that we have created for ourselves. And this is a way out of that. And this is a way to help over 125,000 tipped workers in Massachusetts and hopefully eventually more people in other states.
Grace, we really appreciate your time speaking with us today about this. We appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me and for taking the time to chat with me.